Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the Pork Queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and back for round two, the Pocahontas Firehouse Haunted House, we're going to talk about that today, is back after winning an award for its inaugural year last year. And joining us today is Parker Aden, the Executive Director of the Pocahontas Chamber of Commerce. Parker, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to talk about it.
Really happy to have you here, and congratulations on the award. But first, people probably don't know what I'm talking about if they're not from the Pocahontas area, so it might be best to describe what this thing is. It's not really your traditional haunted house. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so going back to the beginning, I guess, the Chamber had been kind of talking about what we could do as fundraisers and bigger events, and so the idea of doing a haunted house came up, and we decided to take that on. And when we were looking at locations, our fire station is located right along the main highway that passes through town, which is Highway 4. And so we thought, hey, let's team up with the fire department. And they had just kind of a storage shed, and their practice burn house is in that shed right next to the station. And we're like, that would be a great location to have it. We'd be able to, prep it during September, October, and put on a haunted house event that would benefit both organizations. And so last year was our first year of doing that, and this is the second season where we've been able to put on a fun haunted house event together.
Yeah, what was the award for? Because I read that you got this award, but I don't really know what the award is for. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Travel Iowa does the Iowa Tourism Awards, and so we received an award for Outstanding Niche Market Initiative. So basically, in my mind, and if you talk to someone from Travel Iowa, they probably can tell you more technically the difference and stuff. But in my mind, it's very much like, hey, here's a niche event or activity that doesn't apply to necessarily the blanket population of Iowa. It's something that's not necessarily for everyone, but it was a very successful niche event. And so they have a metro and rural category, and we won the rural category for that. And so haunted houses are just one of those things where it's like, it is not for everyone, because there's some people that are like, absolutely not, you will not catch me going through it. I'm happy for you. I love this fundraiser. Here's maybe a donation, but I'm not paying for admission.
Right. No, absolutely. And you mentioned kind of a hint there, which is that this is a fundraiser. And can you explain where the money's going? And then I also want to talk to you about the location you chose, because that's actually really, really interesting. But yeah, where's the money going last year and this year?
Yeah, so last year, it was our first year, so we charged $10 for admission. We felt like that was a good base starting price. And we partnered with Upper Des Moines Opportunity and did a can drive. So if you brought canned goods to donate to them, you got, I think it was $2 off. And then the proceeds were split evenly between the fire department and the chamber. This year, we increased our price to $15 because we said, okay, we know what we're doing. We feel more confident in our abilities to put on a good haunted house. The reception was really warm. And so this year we increased the price to $15, and so we decided moving forward, $3 of everyone's admission is going to go towards a community project, which this year we decided to be our local Meals on Wheels program, because we had a scare with that being defunded and going away completely. And luckily it just got adjusted, so I think they're providing just a few less meals each week, but they still are providing some. And so we said, hey, we want to support that and make sure we can keep them in operation, help them. But then the remaining $12 is being split evenly between the chamber and fire department. So the fire department is able to, make improvements to the fire station, buy necessary equipment, maybe repair some fire trucks, whatever they need it for. And the chamber looks at taking that money and reinvesting it back into the community. So last year we used our proceeds to help fund our sesquicentennial celebration, which will be next year. And we also used it to purchase new trash cans for our Main Street area. So doing just community betterment things that can help increase the quality of living in Pocahontas.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super cool. Why the Firehouse? Like, this is a really interesting location. I can't tell you if I've ever heard, and I'm sure someone in the country's done it somewhere, maybe, but why pick a firehouse? That sounds kind of, it sounds cool. Like you have a lot of opportunity to do some unique stuff with that.
Yeah. Honestly, part of the reason I think initially was because Wendy Malachek, who was on the chamber board and is the one that like went to haunted houses growing up, took her kids to them. She loves them. She's our idea person. And her husband was the fire chief at the time, and he's still involved with the fire department. Um, and so it was kind of just like, hey, this would be a good space that can be emptied out. And then it's basically just an open shed besides the practice burn house, which that is pretty bare bones too. So it just lent itself to being in a highly visible area in Pocahontas, but then also being pretty bare bones where we could decorate it and have the space. And it wasn't like we were having to work around someone else actively using the space per se. Because I mean, they use it, but it's primarily storage. And then I think it's during October when it's harvest time. That's when they have a break from their normal trainings that they would do, or they just adapt to have the trainings be inside the actual fire station or outside on the cement pad area. So it just all of the things kind of clicked together nicely to have the fire station be the place.
Well, you mentioned the key there, which is they don't actually have it in the firehouse itself. They have it in what you call the burn house. So that's like a practice area, I believe, where they actually light things on fire and actually train in there with smoke and stuff. Is this what a burn house is, or what is this thing?
I don't know that they have ever necessarily lit a real fire.
Oh,
in it, but
okay, got it.
They've used like smoke machines and definitely have created that effect of like, this is a house that has rooms that is filled with smoke.
Sure.
And they would have, dummies that they are trying to locate and bring
and like
out
rescue and stuff like that. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect spot for a haunted house, honestly.
Right. It is. And then that way, when you use the fake smoke in the haunted house, it's basically the same stuff. It's not affecting or hurting anything.
Sure. That's actually really, really interesting. That's super fascinating. How big is this? Can you give us an idea? Is this like, I think you mentioned somewhere like there are 20 areas? Like, that's insane. Can you tell us a little bit about what the uniqueness of the areas is? Kind of give people a walkthrough. What does it look like? What should they expect?
Yeah. So last year, we had, I think, about 15 rooms, and this year we increased it to about 20. And so we don't want to give away all of the secrets just because we want
we don't want to give away everything. Absolutely.
Right. But like we have a Wizard of Oz room that I think is really fun. And every room this year is very distinctly themed. Like you leave one room and enter into another space. And there's some haunted houses where like you are just fumbling all around in the black and you might have people grab you, or things like there's some air cannons that sometimes will just shoot air at you. And so it's like, it just catches you off guard, especially when it's dark. We don't want that type of stuff. We want like, you are in an environment, you're in a decorated room. It's harder to see most of the time, but you can still see, and like the decor and kind of the aura of the room is part of the scare, besides people jumping at you and animatronics going off and that sort of thing. So we have like a Wizard of Oz room. I'm trying to think of what we shared. We have like a butcher room, and that is kind of fun and creepy.
Gotta have a butcher room.
Right. We of course have the clowns, we have like a little circus area, and then it goes into a pallet maze we made this year, and there's just clowns everywhere. And those are actually, the clowns are firemen that help volunteer at the event. And so they love their job because they get to be at the exit. So they will like harass you kind of when you first get there and scare people in line, but then they also get to chase you out at the end. It's fun.
Okay, so the firemen, the local firemen in Pocahontas are actually involved in the volunteer effort and in some of the scare tactics, it sounds like?
Yes, yep.
How many of them are there, like, that participate in this?
Oh, I would say there's around 8-ish firemen that help every night. Our force, I want to say, is about 20 to 30 people. I'm trying to think of the pictures on the wall.
Yeah.
And so the chamber, kind of sets up the decorations and does the marketing and the logistics sides, but the fire department provides the space. And then the fire department also provides food every night for our volunteers, because we have a lot of different community volunteers that come in. And so Wendy, will get the food made and stuff, but the fire department pays for that. So it really is a nice partnership in terms of making sure we're keeping everyone happy and we're not only entertaining guests, but keeping our volunteers entertained and happy and having them come back in future years to help us.
Yeah, and like as a side note, it's probably one of the safest haunted houses in the entire world because there are like a bunch of basically trained paramedics and firefighters actually running the thing.
Right.
So if you really care a lot about safety, everybody, this might be, you might have to head up to Pocahontas.
Yeah.
There is a, you mentioned like some of the haunted houses are maybe a little too much for some people. I know that you also have this experience for like families as well that is also unique. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we offer every night a lights on time. So that's from 6 to 7 p.m. each evening. And so that is, the scares are in their rooms, but they're not jumping at you. You just get to like see their costumes, you get to see the decorations. Some of the animatronics might go off, but there's only a few of them that are really like jumpy. So if there are kids who are like really scared of scary things, they will probably still be scared just because, like I said, the rooms are decorated. But it's a good way to kind of like ease them into it. And so sometimes we have families that like will do the lights on and then they come back through with lights off because now they're like, okay, we know what rooms there are. We have a general idea of what to expect. And so it's nice to be able to offer that. And I was surprised both last year and some this year how many just elderly people too that don't necessarily want to be like jump scared, but just want to see the decorations. How many of them come through too during those lights on times? So it really is truly for all ages.
Yeah, absolutely. And like about how many, because you're in your final weekend. Obviously this runs today. What is today? Is today the 25th, 23rd? 23rd. Today is the 23rd. And so this is your final weekend, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And so how many people have you had so far, and are you on track to meet last year? What's that look like?
Yeah, so last year we had 927 people. And this year so far we've had, I think, just over 600 between the first 2 weekends. And so we're on track to meet what we did last year.
Great.
And hopefully do better. We're anticipating this weekend will be busy just because it's the last weekend before Halloween. And Halloween falls at the awkward time where it's like on a Thursday. So it's kind of as far away as you could get from, the last 3 weekends in October to it. But we're anticipating it will be busy.
Yeah, I mean, 600 people so far. You said 900 some last year. In a town like Pocahontas, how large is Pocahontas? It's like 1,800 people?
Yes, nailed it. Good job.
Yeah, I do my research. But that's actually kind of incredible results to get that much turnout in a town that's a little bit smaller. I wanted to ask about the town, the business community there, but before I move on to that, have you, I mean, it is a haunted house after all. Have you ever had to clean up a puddle on the floor or clean up a mess?
Here's the thing. I was really worried about that the first year of like, what do we do? But people keep it in their pants, for lack of better terms. But you do have people who like will say, I just peed my pants, like whatever. I work as a scare in one of the first rooms, and it's a Beetlejuice room. And so he makes you choose, there's like 5 or 6 different doors, and he makes you choose them and go through them or see them. And I think he was like kind of hidden around a corner, and a group came in, and I think he kind of just like jump scared them, and they got laughing for like a minute, I would say. And the wife of the one guy was like, I peed my pants. And he was like, it's the first room. Like, it is literally the first room, and you already peed your pants. Oh, that was so funny. And I'm just sitting behind my door, like laughing because, it's funny that way. But yeah, we have not had to necessarily clean up any of that stuff.
Not yet.
And we do have a porta pod there, so people can go before and after and take care of themselves.
Is there like, I mean, do you guys get trained on how to scare people? Is there like scare training? I kind of think back to like Monsters, Inc. when they have to go through scare training. And I can picture Pocahontas firemen going through scare training. I'm curious if you do any of that beforehand.
Not necessarily. I mean, sometimes it's a matter, we have a lot of kids helping, so sometimes it's like, hey, try this instead, maybe if their scares aren't landing. But a lot of it truthfully is like the person where you're at, you just try different things, and you kind of quickly learn what works the best and what is most effective, because there's a certain amount with the haunted house that like you have to want to be scared or at least to have fun. Like you don't necessarily have to scream, but you can like laugh. Because there's some people that come through a stone face of like, oh, you don't scare me. It's like, well, you're no fun. Just like keep going to the next room. But for the most part, it's enjoyable for both the scare and the person being scared because it's like an amusement park in that sense. So you kind of learn what works and then you roll with that.
Now, I believe that it's not the same haunted house it was last year, right?
You are correct in that.
Is there anything that's the same, or have you redone everything?
Everything is pretty much redone.
Wow, that's a lot of work.
I mean, the burn house part of the shed obviously has the same dimensions and layout, but all of those rooms are different. And so last year, there's 2 different doors that we use as entrance and exit. So we totally flipped that from last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so what used to be the entrance last year is now the exit this year. And so it's a totally different layout. The shed, we have kind of makeshift walls that we construct for the haunted house. And so all of those rooms are completely different and everything's decorated different. We still have like the clown and circus area, but it still is a much different feel from almost what was more carnival feeling last year. Like this year, it's definitely more of a circus. So it's fun to be able to have this space specifically because you can turn it into something completely different. So it is a new experience. And it's not like, oh, well, we did this last year. So, we want people to keep coming back every year and enjoy it.
Sure. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, because you want return business. That's how you're going to, keep this thing going. So you have to remix it every year and make something new. Now, it's not just for Pocahontas. I mean, you can pull from surrounding towns. I'm assuming you have people coming from surrounding towns as well, because how much competition is there in that area?
There is an app I know, and I should actually look up what.
No, you don't need to look it up in real time, but because I think I think that when you started this last year, was there any other haunted house in Pocahontas?
No, the closest haunted house to us, I guess, would be Rockwell City.
Okay.
And then Shaler was really well known in Northwest Iowa too. And those both have been long running forever. But there's an app called Fright Maps that we are now listed on. And that has like haunted houses across the state and stuff. So if people like haunted houses, I encourage you to, look at that because it is, I think, just an independent person who oversees that app.
Sure.
But yeah, Pocahontas was kind of like a haunted house desert. You had to drive pretty far, but people are willing to for that stuff.
Sure, that makes sense.
The majority of our people so far this year has been out of town people. And so that's where last year we had a lot of in town. And so we're kind of like, okay, this weekend, how many people are going to have? Because we feel like a lot of the in town people we can remember. I mean, we've had some, but there's a lot from out of in town still that we haven't had yet. So we're just waiting for that shoe to fall and it to get crazy.
So obviously this is a fundraiser for Meals on Wheels, the Firehouse, but also the Chamber, of which you're the executive director of. So in a town, Pocahontas, but 1,800 people, what are like primary chamber focuses in Pocahontas? Like what's the typical member look like? And what are some of the goals you have for this year and next year?
Yeah, so our chamber is pretty different from a lot of others just because we are a small town. And so I'm actually not full-time, I'm part-time. Ask me what week it is, and that answer might change because like we have our summer celebration, and that's basically, I'm working 40 hours that week. But we have a really good board of directors that helps make it possible too. But with anything like a chamber, you need someone who's a paid person that can like keep on track of the certain things that need to get done. So with that all being said, our chamber is pretty heavily event focused. We have Heritage Days, a car show we do every year. We have a carnival now that's incorporated with that. The haunted house, I think, is probably our biggest event in terms of, people we can track, and in terms of generating funds for us. And then we do the art walk in November on Small Business Saturday, and then we have Hometown Christmas just a couple weeks after that. And so those are the chamber's primary focuses kind of throughout the years to get those set up and make sure they're successful. And when I can, there might be a grant that I help write and apply for the community, or there might be a special project in helping businesses with, inquiries they have or challenges they may face. But my job primarily is the event planning and coordinating.
You mentioned Heritage Days. I don't actually know what that is. So for people wondering what Heritage Days are, I want to explore that. And then I also want to talk to you a little bit about the small business breakdown in Pocahontas, what kind of businesses are typical members, and what that kind of profile looks like. But let's start with Heritage Days. What is that?
Yeah. So Heritage Days is your just small town summer celebration. And so we have, a parade. We do fireworks usually during that time. Back in, I want to say it was 2021 or 2022, we started having it with our county fair, actually. And so it's kind of just, there's a lot of fun activities that you would think of when you think of like a town summer celebration. One of the banks sponsors free kids admission for a movie that had come out that summer at our movie theater. We have just a lot of live music throughout that weekend too. We've done, like bags tournaments and softball tournaments and stuff before. So just that typical small town fun feeling where if you're looking for a weekend to come back or to visit a town, that's the weekend to do it because there's so much happening.
And then what's the kind of the breakdown? Like what kind of small businesses do you see that are really growing in Pocahontas right now?
Yeah, so Pocahontas is really fortunate as a small town that our main street is pretty full. Because I know there's not a lot of small towns that can say that. And we do have the benefit of being a county seat where our courthouse is literally at the end of our main street.
Oh, interesting.
So you get that beautiful view when you turn onto Main Street, like you see the courthouse at the end and Courthouse Square. But we have a good amount of retail businesses. You always would love to see a couple more, but we have like a comic shop. We have a couple of different home decor stores and some boutiques. Med Spa Express is one that opened a few years ago, and that has brought a lot of clients in from out of town too. We have a good amount of restaurants. We just had a Mexican restaurant open, El Amigo, this at the beginning of this last summer, and they've been really busy. But you have Udder Cow. A lot of people know Pocahontas for too, because that one is on Highway 4. So
what is it called?
The Udder Cow.
The Udder Cow. Is it ice cream?
Yeah. So it started actually as I think the Purple Cow and had burnt down, and they moved like basically across the street from where they were. So then it became the Udder Cow because it was the other.
Yeah. Wah, wah.
And so when I was in college, actually though, that was like we had a really good girls basketball team at the time, so people knew Pocahontas for the girls basketball team, or because they had memories of like going up to the Great Lakes, like Okoboji, the Great Iowa Lakes, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And they would like stop there and get ice cream, and they're like, "Oh, it's so great," and it's like, yeah, it's fun. It's a fun way to have people recognize Pocahontas because it's just, we also have our princess statue too on the east side of town, and people will stop there and get a picture, and there's like a mini log cabin museum with it too. So that's just some of the ways I guess people have identified Pocahontas.
Yeah.
And
Well, I was just going to say last question before I let you go is just why do you think that in some smaller towns in Iowa, there is kind of a Main Street pullback a little bit? Some are struggling, but then some like Pocahontas, you mentioned that it's pretty vibrant, and you might not know the answer to this, but do you?
I think a lot of it depends on leadership in the community and having people who are willing to do things. Both in terms of like, hey, I have the energy and I want to do this project, and then the people who have the power to say yes or no being like, okay, let's run with it. And obviously there's always like ways that sometimes projects have to be adapted or they can't be facilitated exactly as you hoped for maybe. But like I think of our Hometown Pride group really kind of led the charge on Elbert Park as our city's park. And installing new playground equipment and making some improvements to that. And it really was kind of like, okay, yes, like we will, green light feels like a weird word to say, but just we will support you in your endeavors for this. And so when you have groups that are ambitious, just giving them the space to let them fly, I think is a big part of it. And there is a really, really good book called 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. And that I think is great for any community to read, because that was one when I first started Chamber I read, and I felt like gave me a lot of good insight and advice into what you do to take care of your town and not kill it, despite the title sounding like that's what you're trying to do.
Parker Aden, the executive director of the Pocahontas Chamber of Commerce, and of course the Pocahontas Haunted House is in its final weekend. What's the website for that? How do people get tickets and sign up for it?
Yeah, so you can purchase tickets just showing up. show up before 9:45 p.m. and we will make sure that we can get you into the haunted house. If you want to learn more information, you can go to Pocahontas. Pocahontas is in the town spelling, or POKY for short. PocahontasChamber.com, PokeChamber.com. One of the first images when you start scrolling on our homepage is the haunted house, and it will take you to that page, and you can, see where to park and that sort of all the fun logistics you could want to know in traveling.
Absolutely. Parker, thank you so much for joining me and the audience, the listeners and the viewers on the Iowa podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it too.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa podcast.